This is the DIY Toolshed Podcast, hosted by the DIY Guy, Tony Sandoval, the place where we make things happen and get things done. Here to help you build things, make things, do things. We are creators. We will be creative. You can't stop us. Well, okay, everybody. Welcome to the DIY Toolshed Podcast. This is the DIY Guy, Tony Sandoval. I am your host. Welcome to my toolshed. I appreciate it every time. I've been looking at the stats, and slowly but surely, we're getting people who are checking in and checking out the podcast, which is awesome. We also have the home for the podcast on mewe.com, mewe.com. Look under the pages, and you look for the pages. It says the DIY Toolshed Podcast. Click on that, follow that page, participate, keep an eye out for when things are coming on like this. You'll find out when we're doing all of these kind of recordings, when we have guests, different things like that. You also get to see videos. You get notification of our written articles, and of course, what's going on with the actual podcast here. So mewe.com is where we live, and I'm glad you're going to listen here. I'm happy to have you. So I am a beekeeper. I've been doing it for a long time now, a number of years. I did it professionally for a while as both an instructor and managing apiaries for other people, harvesting honey for them, for their businesses, etc. But mostly for myself, really, to be honest. I like bees. And one of my favorite things to do with bees has always been what I call bee rescue. I love to rescue bees. What does bee rescue really mean? It's not as, dramatic, as I guess, as it sounds. Basically, bees swarm. That's how they're a manner of their reproduction. And every spring, bees will swarm. And a new queen and a chunk of the previous bunch colony of bees will make up their minds and say, we're going to go start a new place and leave everybody else and a new queen that was born there back at the old place, and the new ones go out and find a new place to live. And those swarms will land in the darndest places. They like to live in walls, in attic ceilings, roofs, trees, big old wherever meets their basic needs. And sometimes people don't always appreciate when they make that new home in that wall or that roof or that tree in their wall, roof, or tree. People don't like to share their houses and trees and whatnot, their sheds, garages. They don't like that. So they call me, and I go, and instead of the homeowner, property owner, killing the bees, which happens far too often, I take them out alive, take the whole nest, get all of them, and put them in a new place. My place. I have different places all around the area that I put them in. I put them in a beehive, put the beehive somewhere that's going to be near lots of good stuff for them to collect: pollen, nectar, water, those kind of things. And at that point in time, we're all happy. Everybody wins. Homeowner, property owner doesn't have bees in an unwanted place. The bees get to live in a place that's made just for them. And of course, I get to harvest and care for bees and harvest the goods of the hive. There's different mental approaches to beekeeping. There's conventional, basic, modern approach to beekeeping. And the number one reason, 9.9 out of 10 beekeepers follow the modern traditional method approach of beekeeping, which is honey, 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 more honey, and then more honey. That's what beekeeping boils down to for most beekeepers. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's not a negative. It's quite positive for most of them. People want to get something nice for what they invest their effort and energy into. And believe me, bees will make you pay for it. So it's not like it's a uneven trade there, because you're giving them a nice place to live, usually nicer than the places they might find on their own. You're helping keep them, hopefully keep checking them, keeping them disease free, keeping them pests and invaders out of their hive. You're doing a good thing. You're being a great landlord, and you collect the rent every so often in the form of honey. I got nothing against people who are in the traditional, modern traditional approach to beekeeping, uh, and the efforts and everything they do, the methods that they use, that they follow, are geared towards maximizing honey production. And that takes a certain approach. That takes using certain techniques, certain methods, following a certain timeline, doing certain things that maximize, make the most honey, get the bees. It kind of works the bees in a direction of making more honey than they normally might make, because honeybees, like humans, are one of the few creatures on earth who will make more than they need. They produce more than they need, so long as they've got the sources, food, which is pollen and nectar, and water and space to store all that. They will make as much honey as they possibly can, more than you might even believe. I have taken bee nests out of barn walls where the entire wall was full. We filled 55-gallon drum after 55-gallon drum with honey, and it was just incredible. And bees are that way. They will make more than they need as long as they've got the resources and the space. So for the modern traditional beekeeper, that's not a problem. That's the goal. That's the point. And the bees really don't mind, because it's what they're going to do anyway. So there's that. However, I'm more of a utilitarian type guy. I'm not just interested in honey. Don't get me wrong. I like honey and I trade honey. I use honey. Used to sell it. But I want more than just honey. I want pollination for my garden. I want pollination for my neighbors' gardens too, because sometimes they give me stuff from their garden. That's pretty cool, right? And it helps them. Everybody wins again. But so I want pollination. I want beeswax. I like to make beeswax stuff. Candles, soaps, lotions, lip balms. You can use just plain old beeswax just to, like when you're sewing and you got to get the string and you can wax the string up. You put wax on screws and nails and help make them more waterproof, and help actually they separate and screw into wood and some materials better and don't crack or break the wood if you put beeswax on them. There are 1,000, maybe more uses for beeswax. So I want to harvest beeswax. You can harvest pollen if you use certain techniques and methods to get so they keep enough pollen for their own use and then get extra for you to take. And pollen has been found to be very healthy as a supplement to certain diets, as an ingredient to certain recipes. So harvesting pollen is a good thing. And then, of course, there's another product that honeybees make called propolis. And propolis is this sticky, starry sap type substance. It's bee glue is what we call it. And they use this to coat the inside of their hives, to cover openings, cracks, gaps, holes. They will, even if they happen to say a mouse sneaks in over the winter and they kill the mouse, because they will kill that mouse, and they don't want that mouse to contaminate their hive, right? They will coat the mouse body, the carcass, with propolis, just so that it's contained and doesn't make a mess and biologically disturb the rest of the hive. propolis has a lot of good possible uses. It's one of the first things they used to make toothpaste out of. You can make your own toothpaste with propolis. You can use propolis to help with things like sore throats and coughs and covering, cuts and scratches. It's one of the first natural things that, everybody knocks nature kind of oriented healing medications kind of things. You know, some people get a bit carried away and overboard, but remember, all medicines really came from these kind of things. Modern medicine just uses, medications just measure better. It's more consistent. So modern medicine is great, and they use the source of whatever, the core of whatever is there, and that's all fine and wonderful. But sometimes it's fine just to use like propolis, and you mix it in and you make what's called a tincture. You mix it into a tea. You can use it in a lot of different ways, and very helpful, just to your general health. So there's like 4 things right there we can harvest from a beehive that are 3 more things than your typical beekeeper is interested in harvesting, and actually is counterproductive to the typical beekeeper who wants to harvest honey. Okay? The typical beekeeper has to use methods that maximize honey production. One of the big things that does that is the beeswax is golden. You never sacrifice beeswax. The only beeswax they ever really get to use to harvest is what's called the capping. So when they go to cut the wax from the top, they skim a layer of wax off the top of the honeycombs when they go to get the honey out, and they spin it. And they got to take that top layer of wax. That's called cappings, and it's very clean and white, and it's very nice and very attractive for making things like candles and whatnot with. But that means most of the wax is being left behind for the bees, because what they're doing is they're saying, well, the bees will make more honey in this space. They don't have to draw out all those wax cells anymore. They already got them mostly drawn out, and all they got to basically do is cap them off again. So it's maximizing honey production, because bees aren't spending their time making wax comb to put honey in. They've already got it. They're putting honey in, and you just keep as fast as you can fill them combs back in. They'll fill it with honey, and you're harvesting that honey again, maximizing honey production. So it's really working against yourself to take more wax than the cappings, and that's not really always a lot of wax. Unless you're talking thousands of hives, you're not really getting that much wax. So it's nice clean wax. That's the A list of beeswax, but there's other waxes, qualities of wax that aren't as quite clean as cappings, but it's still very, very useful and can be used in a lot of different things that somebody like me, a homestead beekeeper, want to use it for. So we do. And then propolis. Again, the more you scrape propolis, the more the bees are spending time putting more propolis in to cover certain gaps instead of making honey. You following the path here. So homestead beekeeping doesn't necessarily have the same set of goals and objectives as traditional modern beekeeping does. And that's not bad or wrong either. It's a different set of goals and objectives, and it's okay. That's fine to do it that way. The whole point is self-sufficiency. One is more either a hobby and or commercial oriented. The first one, modern traditional beekeeping, is either geared towards the hobbyist or to the commercial beekeeper, and that's how you make money, because the demand is for honey. That's what people think of bees, think of honey. That's what they do. And so that's the number one thing. You want to maximize that, you have to sacrifice certain of the other things, because then the bees spend time doing those instead of making honey. So it's a goal and objectives thing. And because so many beekeepers are focused, and that's how they learn, that's how they're introduced. So they'll sit there and they'll see somebody like me and, what are you doing taking all that wax out? That's wrong. And no, that's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just different. And believe it or not, before modern beekeeping, and I say modern, that's in the last 100 years, especially before Mr. Lorenzo Langstroth invented the modern hive, and Mr. Didant and many others created things like the spinner, the centrifugal force spinner to harvest the honey from, frames. Charles Didant, invented these frames to maximize stability and handling for those purposes. It was all geared towards maximizing honey production. And again, that's fine. And that made honey more accessible in different formats. Because prior to that, the only honey you got was called cut comb honey. And if you didn't get it straight from the comb, and literally they cut combs into little squares or rectangles, and that's how you bought it, and that's how you ate it, was right there from the comb. You took it home like a stick of butter, and you press your little knife or spoon down, and that's you squish the wax and the honey pooled up, and you take your spoonful of honey. And that's how it used to be before modern beekeeping equipment came along. And so back then, beekeepers were not just honey producers. They were honeycomb, and they lost a lot of their wax because they had to sell it in that form. But also, they were a lot more along the lines of what I call homestead beekeeping now, because many of them, that it's type of farming, and that was what they did. So they used the beeswax. They sold candles because, believe it or not, prior to the early 1900s, electricity still wasn't as common in especially rural places or suburban places as they are now. So candles were still a huge thing, and beeswax candles burned more clean. They burned longer. They burned smelled nicer and than your oil-based candles, your petroleum-based candles. So people harvested the wax because they had an actual very direct need for beeswax, because they made candles, because they made their soap with beeswax, because they made lotions and skin creams. Farmers especially get rough. You're always handling stuff. And so they used creams and, things like that when they were doing, they get literally, you get calluses and whatnot. You're out there in the cold and the dry air, and they would make lip balms with beeswax, and they still do. So there was a greater demand, everyday stuff that you could get from beeswax. And so the need to harvest everything back then was everyday life. It wasn't just a novel thing. It wasn't just how cute or how quaint like it is now. Look, this is made from bees. And okay, well, it's neat now, but we have so many other products that they make those kind of things from that it's taken some of it's made it a novelty rather than an everyday fact. And so people nowadays who practice, again, my term, homestead beekeeping, which is basically beekeeping for the purpose of self-sufficiency. I want to make my own toothpaste. I want to make my own soap, my own candles, my own lip balm, my own skin cream. I want to make those things myself. Very DIY now. And now, back then it was survival. Now it's DIY. I just don't want to buy it. I want to make my own because it makes me, I like to do it. I like knowing what's in the ingredients, what's in my stuff I use and make. So the homestead mentality is self-sufficiency. And you want to get as much as you can. And those bees provide so many different things in a hive besides just honey. So the homestead beekeeper does sacrifice honey. You sacrifice a honey harvest. You're not getting as much because you're taking the beeswax. You're taking the propolis, okay? Especially beeswax and propolis. I personally try not to harvest pollen. It's really, I don't have any real need for it. And I think the bees, for health terms and raising new broods of bees, they need it more than I'll ever need it. So I don't personally pull pollen out of a hive, but a lot of people do. And they do use it in their, their health and nutrition. Pardon me. Boy, just one of them days. And they use that. So they do it. I don't. But propolis and beeswax, the more bees, more time and resources and effort bees spend on making those, they're using less to make honey. So you're sacrificing a little bit to get those. I find it worth it because I get as much, if sometimes not more value out of the beeswax than I do the honey, especially now that I'm diabetic because I can't have that much honey and I love honey. Oh my God, I'm thinking of toast with honey and butter melted over it. See what I mean? I'm killing myself here. I should never have done this episode. But anyway, I digress. So that's homestead beekeeping. It's beekeeping, but with a different motive. It's a different set of goals and objectives. It's not bad. It's not wrong. Just like traditional modern beekeeping. Not bad, not wrong, just different. Different set of goals and objectives. Different motivation. Okay. We sometimes get into our little camps and cliques, and beekeepers love their camps and cliques, and they will start going to war over, well, you can't do that. Well, yeah, I can. It's just got to manage and use different methods and techniques, still focusing on the bee's health, still focusing on the bee's best interest, but just different in how we manage those resources and how we're taking care of the bees and the type of hives and the type of systems we're using. That's all. That's all it is. It's just different. So there's all that in a nutshell. It appears not many people have gotten their app installed yet because I'm not looking at anybody joining us, but that's okay. What is this, the fifth episode already? So we're still new. I'm hoping that some of you get your app. Install that Podbean app. You can then call in just like a regular radio show. Call in, ask a question, make a comment. I'll bring you on. We're going to do it. But you got to install that Podbean app. You can get it from the Google Play Store. You can get it from the Apple Store on your smartphones or your tablets. Bring it in. Let's have some fun. Let's bring you into this podcast and let's make this about not just me, but all of us. Let's do this. I look forward to hearing in the future from you guys. Future episodes are going to be with more guests, and we're going to have more fun trying to do topics like this where I want to hear from you. I want to know what kind of methods and tools and things and the ways you do things to make things and build things and do things. So can't do that, though, if you don't get and install the Podbean app on your phone. Got to do that. Okay. Let me think here. I got a little sidetracked. Oh yeah. So back on the beekeeping thing. Okay. What kind of equipment and hives? That's the next probably besides, well, what is homestead beekeeping? People, well, then what kind of hive do you use? Is it the same as organic beekeeping? Is it the same as, really, it's a lot of the same type of tools, equipment, and methods in terms of health, managing the health of the bees, as it is regular modern beekeeping. Is just how you do it, how you go about doing it. Now, personally, there are certain pieces of equipment that give you more beeswax than modern beekeeping. So like say if you're using top bar hives that don't use frames, those are all wax except for the top, and you just slice it right from the top. So if you're really focused on beeswax, you might want to use that. Or you can use the current frames and use what's called a foundationless frame method. So there's no plastic or wax foundation, no metal wires running in the middle of it, because you're not going to spin it anyway. You spin something with no foundation at all, no wire support, no nothing, you're going to get a big mess. It's going to blow out and it's a nightmare. You don't want to do that anyway, though, because you're trying to preserve the beeswax. So then you use a method called crush and strain. You just grab yourself a big potato smasher and you mash all that up in a bucket and you pour the honey out and you let the honey drain out of the wax, and then you separate that. And there's different ways, and they've got some great strainer systems out now, and press like a jam presser system. They have really some neat equipment that's out there to do crush and strain method. Even if you do use, say, like plastic foundation, you just scrape it right off the plastic just like you would anything else, and then you're back to crush and strain again. So you can still use a lot of the same equipment. You want to always want to be looking first and foremost at the health of your bees. It's like any other livestock. You got cattle, you're looking for beef cattle, you're looking for dairy cattle. You're trying to, like dairy cattle, you're not killing them because you're getting milk from them. but you need to keep them healthy so they produce milk. And you need to manage them in such a way that they produce more milk or as much milk as they're capable of producing. We don't want to get into artificial things like steroids and all that, because then sometimes it introduces elements to the food you're trying to harvest, and that's not good. But you can use methods and techniques that make it increase the efficiency. So they make as much as they're capable of making on their own without any extra possible things that might leak into the product. We don't want that. So maximizing efficiency of their ability to make beeswax, to make propolis. You can do little things to kind of goad them into making more propolis, making more beeswax, making more honey. You know, the whole modern beekeeping hive system is based on more honey and doing little things that use and manipulate bees' behavior to making more honey. Now I'm talking about, well, let's use those techniques and behaviors to manipulate bees. Instead of more honey, more beeswax, more propolis, more whatever. And again, it's not out of their normal capability system. We want to stay within their capability, but we don't want to push, beyond that. But let's maximize it. If they can make this much and not be harmed, by golly, let's get this much out of it. And then we take all that and we're making all kinds of stuff. So it's not about you got to do this organically or modern with chemicals or with treatments, without treatments. Those are different discussions that fall into all of beekeeping, whether you're using homestead approach or a modern honey-based approach. It doesn't matter, because you're still going to face those decisions anyway. Okay. That's the important part there. So that's homestead beekeeping in a nutshell. Hopefully I get to hear some of your comments over on MeWe. Leave some comments here. If you listen to it here, leave comments. Let me know. I'll reply and respond and get you answers if you have a specific question. And of course, back to get that Podbean app, install it on your phone. Not only do you get to interact and be part of the show here, you find other ones. If you get into episodes, you can find all kinds of different podcasts that you might interest you, and it'll allow you to do the same thing and listen to them with those, especially the ones that are hosted by Podbean. Otherwise, if they're not hosted by Podbean, you still get to listen to them. I've got a list here on our Podbean website here, the host channel that shows some of the podcasts I listen to. So you can see that list too if you come over here. All right, folks. Well, I'm glad to have had you listen, and I hope that we get to hear from some of you in the future, and I hope to read your messages and comments. And I'm already starting to work on the next episode of the podcast, believe it or not. But I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, because I'm choosing from one or two different things. So it could be one of the two, and then you'll be mad at me if I tell you it's one and then I end up turning it into the other. I don't like doing that to you. I don't want to do that to you. So, but I'm already working on it. You guys have a great day. Have a lot of fun. Be creative. Go out and do things. Make things. Build things. That's all I could ever ask. That's all I could ever hope for you. Because the more you create, the better you are. The better you are, the better you feel. The better you feel, the more you want to share that. And then, of course, is what makes better people. Because we're sharing all the stuff we create, and we feel good about doing it. So, get out there. Do stuff, make things. All right, folks? Y'all have a great one.